Welcome to the SALVANT report. My name is LEGRAND PARISIEN SALVANT. Thanks for the privilege of your time. To help you understand the world we live in, the SALVANT report has garnered information from several sources using their most recent reports to shed light on multiple events happening around the world. We bring to you several subjects, and some of them, they are not doing the headlines. And we just want you to understand the world that you live in. And sometimes we talk about subject, and then later on, you could hear a lot of noise about them. And our job is to prepare you when this kind of thing happen. And today we're going to talk to you about the US dollar. And our subject is, can the US dollar survive the US government? Can the US dollar survive the US government? The US dollar has dominated the global economy for more than 7 decades. Roughly 90% of foreign exchange transactions today involve the dollar. We're talking about the American dollar. The overwhelming share of international trade, including 74% in Asia and 96% in the Americas, is priced in US dollars. Dollars account for 58% of central bank reserve held outside the United States of America. Around the world, private holdings heavily favor dollar-denominated assets. Dollar dominance yields important benefits for the United States of America. It reduces price volatility in US foreign trade, enables Washington to borrow expensively and at relatively low cost, and gives the US government powerful tools for sanctioning its adversaries. And as the renowned economist Kenneth Rogoff convincingly argues in his highly engaging new book, Our Dollar, Your Problem, a dominant currency is incredibly difficult to displace. Inertia, however, is a powerful force keeping the dollar on top. The strength of the US political and financial institution is another, to keep the dollar on top. And although numerous countries have chafed against the dollar's incumbency advantages, but Rogoff also warns that dollar dominance may have reached its peak, suggesting the United States of America will need to craft its policies with care if it is to hang on to its privileged position. And one of the reasons why Mr. Rogoff warns that dollar dominance may have reached its peak, we have what now with us, the BRICS. Let's talk about the BRICS for a moment. BRICS started in 2001 as BRC, and the acronym coined by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill, and that stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and in 2010 South Africa was added to it. Therefore we have BRICS, B-R-I-C-S. The BRICS nation have a combined total population of approximately 3.21 billion, or about 41.5% of the world population. And let's say about one statistic that can tell you about the importance of BRICS. In 2022, the PIB was 21.5%. 21.5% of the global economy. The GDP, the world GDP, the BRICS country nation has contributed 31.5%, 31.5%. And the G7, you are aware of the G7, United States of America, Britain, Canada, France, Italy, Japan, and we have also the other one is let's see, Britain, yes, and 7 countries. They have contributed themselves 30.7% of the world GDP in 2022. Okay? The United Kingdom, it's one of them, I'm sorry. I didn't mention United Kingdom. You have Japan, you have Italy, you have France, you have Canada, you have a USA, and we talk about Germany. Okay. And we talk about the British too. So this is what they have contributed. How can you understand the BRICS and what are they doing? They think in a bipolar world, you have the China and the US, and all these countries. They said the BRICS alliance is not so much a counter to the West, but more of a forum for increased sovereign and autonomous thought. However, China, on the other hand, was using the platform for its global political ambition. And now, according to reports quoting Russian lawmaker Alexander Babakov's, the BRICS nations are in the process of creating a new medium for payments, established on a strategy that doesn't defend the dollar or euro. It reportedly indicated that the new currency would be secured by gold and other commodities such as rare earth element. Can the US dollar survive the US government? We are coming backward now to the US. Successive US administrations have adopted policies that shore up or at least avoided undermining the dollar's dominance. They respected the independence of the Federal Reserve and the United States international commitment, including its role as a steward of the global financial institution. This administration, however, is attacking the institutional foundation that underpin the dollar status. It is testing the bounds of executive power and receiving little pushback for doing so. The current administration is attempting to weaken the independence of Federal Reserve's monetary policy authority and of the government's official statistical agencies. And it is questioning the United States' commitment to its ally and partner. Can the US dollar survive the US government? And when we talk about the central bank reserve held outside the United States of America at 58%, that's very strong. However, we're going to find out, since the advent of the Eurozone in 1999, for example, the dollar share of foreign exchange reserve has fallen from 71 to 58. Still strong, but it's a huge lapse. And the euro has held on to second place with a 20% share. Using the US dollars allows foreign countries to conduct business all over the world without maintaining balances of multiple countries' currencies, a convenience that reinforces the dollar's position, just as the convenience of using English has made it the common language of global communication. Diversifying away from the dollar could come with considerable costs because it could require holding balances of a large number of currencies and managing the risk of exposure to fluctuations in each. Still, both allies and adversaries of the United States of America have tested the dollar's status. As Rogoff, the economist, explains, however, none of these challengers have had what it takes to become dominant. China and Russia have also become more motivated to seek alternative to the dollar as the United States and its allies become increasingly effective at using the dollar-denominated payment system to impose sanctions. Can the US dollar survive the US government? And I'm going to repeat the last sentence. China and Russia have also become more motivated to seek alternative to the dollar as the US and its ally become increasingly effective at using the dollar-denominated payment system to impose sanctions. We got the example right here. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, for instance, Washington and its allies limited the access of Russian banks to international payment system, placed a price cap on Russian oil exports, and froze Russia's sovereign asset held abroad. What about China? China, in part, to reduce its own exposure, it's now working with partners, including Brazil, India, and Russia, to develop an alternative payment system using its renminbi, if I say it right, and working with additional countries to set standards for cross-border digital currency transaction, capitalizing on the U.S. absence from this area. Can the U.S. dollar survive the U.S. government? And we said the U.S. government, not the U.S. current administration, because when this administration is over, the consequences of all decisions they are taking right now that helping the dollar to lose its dominant status, the consequences are going to be there for the other administration to deal with them. That's what we said, can the US dollar survive the US government? What are the benefits? What are the benefits for the US? We went and found out in the 1960s, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, who would later become the president of France, as all you know, decried the dollar's dominant status and the benefits it afforded to the US as an exorbitant privilege. That was in the 1960s. And why he was saying that, it's just because as the country issuing the dominant currency in the formal international payment system, the US has significant visibility into cross-border transaction and also powerful means to impose sanctions to impede those flows. Washington has ample influence over the rules of the international financial system. It is the only member with enough voting power to veto decision at the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. What are the benefits for the US? Dollar dominance enables the US to borrow expensively, as we said earlier, and pay considerably lower interest on its debt than many other countries. A privilege that is particularly important today when US government debt is high and rising. Now $38 trillion, and the US is paying $3.2 billion interest every single day. The dollar's dominance can allow Washington to borrow relatively cheaply because foreign investors are willing to pay a premium for the convenience yield of US government bonds. These safe, highly liquid assets have been in strong demand because they can be relied on to hold their value in time of financial stress and are the dominant form of collateral underlying many international financial transactions. The economist that we talked about a while ago, his name is Kenneth Rogoff, the renowned economist. He said the dollar's dominance, and Mr. Rogoff highlights recent estimates that the US government saved $140 billion each year in international debt service costs as a result of the lower interest it is able to pay on its borrowing, a figure that may be as high as $600 billion per year when you include payments on debt held by domestic investors. Even though the US at this time is paying 3.1 or 3.2, depending, billion dollars of interest on its debt every single day for the $38 trillion. And by the way, it takes this country, the US, 70 days when it gets from $37 trillion in debt to $38 trillion, which is now 70 days. That's been 2 months and 10 days to borrow another $1 trillion. Now what will happen if the dollar falls from its pedestal? And if that happens, American people will pay the price. The dollar's reputation as a safe asset typically means that the demand for the currency surges during time of financial stress. Just remember, we said it, 58% of central bank reserve held outside the United States of America, it's in dollars. And 75% in Asia, 96% in the Americas as it relates to share of international trade, is priced in US dollars. Now imagine if the dollar falls from its pedestal. What would happen? The Americans or the American people will pay the price. The United States, therefore, can borrow a lot of money, even amid an economic crisis. Can borrow a lot of money. And you see that they're doing that. 70 days, from $37 trillion to $38 trillion as the national debt in 70 days. During the 2008 global financial crisis, I think some of you may remember that, and the 2020 downturn of the global economy amid the COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, the US government was able to cushion the effect of economic shocks on American businesses, workers, and households, and at the same time ensure a more rapid recovery compared with other countries. Why? Because of the dollar's reputation, because of the dollar status, and because of the dollar's dominance. What would happen if the dollar falls from its pedestal? The American people will pay the price. Is this administration making decision to help the dollar to keep its dominance or its dominant status? Let's say, for you to understand, yet dollar dominance is not entirely an advantageous for the United States of America. The renowned economist Kenneth Rogoff notes that historically, countries with dominant currencies have typically been those with leading military power, and being a military superpower is extremely expensive. Being a military superpower is extremely expensive. And he argues that the practice of temporarily swapping dollars in exchange for foreign currency from a few major central banks in moment of financial crisis represents a burden for the US of America. Perhaps the most politically salient burden has been the competitive advantage of American manufacturing businesses and workers during periods where the US dollar was particularly strong. However, from 2000, the year China's entry into the World Trade Organization, WTO, to 2005, from 2000 with China's entry in the WTO to 2005, for instance, China did not allow its currency to rise in value against the US dollar in nominal terms, despite a threshold increase in China's export to the US. This combination had devastating, long-lasting effects on jobs and manufacturing in factory towns across the US. Still, it was not dollar dominance itself that brought about these losses, but the combination of Chinese industrial policies, trade policies, and currency intervention, and the failure of US officials to effectively counter those practices. BRICS started in 2001. South Africa was added in 2010. Now they are in their 16 years. What is the policy of the US government to effectively counter all the BRICS practices? Can the US dollar survive the US government? If the dollar falls from its pedestal, what would happen? On the whole, Americans stand to gain from preserving the dollar dominance that has endured over the past 7 decades. Continued dominance requires that the US dollar securities remain attractive to foreign investors. Underlying that attractiveness, the renowned economist Kenneth Rogoff emphasizes is the strength of US institutions and norms. First, an independent Federal Reserve, the rule of law, and a record of reliable international engagement. 1, 2, 3. An independent Federal Reserve, the rule of law, and a record of reliable international engagement. U.S. institutions guard against high inflation, which could reduce the value of claims, protect creditor rights, preserve access to capital markets, and maintain strong credit worthiness. Those foundations have protected the dollar's status even as U.S. policy has fluctuated and foreign challenges have emerged. What about it now? The expectation that dollar dominance will persist is based on assessment of both the advantages of incumbency and the resilience of UN's institution. The state is the institutions. The trouble is that our dollar, your problems, meaning the book of the renowned economist Kenneth Rogoff, the book, The Trouble, is that ends with the November 2024 US election. So when you're reading the book, it doesn't engage with the step the actual president has taken in his second term that may challenge those assumptions. This current administration, unilateral action ignores Congress' constitutional power to set tariff. To date, country-by-country tariffs have risen to an average effective rate of about 17%, which amounts to a nearly 8-fold increase in tariffs since last year. This current administration, furthermore, has repeatedly questioned the Federal Reserve independence in setting monetary policy. For foreign investors to remain willing to invest heavily in low-yield treasury securities, they must have confidence that the U.S. will not inflate away the value of their claims. The independence of the central bank is vital to that confidence. And Rogoff makes a compelling case, drawing on its own seminal research, that U.S. treasuries are considered safe asset in part because the Fed has maintained its political independence and has a record of delivering mostly low and stable inflation since the mid-1980s. The current president has criticized the Federal Reserve for not lowering rates fast enough and threatened to fire the Federal Reserve chair. You're all aware of that. But remember, Rogoff emphasizes is the strength of U.S. institution and norm that's preserving the dollar dominance for over 7 decades. An independent Federal Reserve, the rule of law, and a record of reliable international engagement. And we see that the current president is criticizing the Federal Reserve and even threatening to fire the Federal Reserve chair. All of this amounts to an unprecedented attack on the independence of the institution. Is this administration playing with fire? Can playing with fire by this administration help the US dollar dominance? Can the US dollar survive the US government or all the action of this administration that would have consequences to the other that will be followed? Can the US dollar survive the US government? Is this administration playing with fire? Worryingly, we all worry, worryingly, all of this is happening just when the administration's new law is adding more than $4 trillion over 10 years to the U.S. national debt, which is what now, as we speak, $38 trillion. U.S. debt is already about 100% of GDP. And the cost of interest on the debt are rising each year. 3 years ago, it was $2 billion a day. Now it's $3.1 billion a day. the interest on the national debt for the U.S. of America. As this administration plans to borrow even more money, its attacks on the foundation of the dollar dominance may jeopardize the advantages that come with ready demand for U.S. Treasury securities, including saving more than $1 trillion in debt service payment over the course of a decade. Haïtien captain dem là, il dit que va modé droit ka bon manger, mais ka bon manger. The dollar dominance helping the US, and now you have an administration that attacking the institution that keep the dollar's dominance in international trade. And the renowned economist Kenneth Rogoff couldn't be clearer. That's the strength of the US dollar. The strength of the institution and norms, an independent Federal Reserve, the rule of law, and a record of reliable international engagement. And you keep this, the US will save $1 trillion in debt service payments over the course of a decade. $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Yet, it is folly. It is really folly to bet on the alternative to the dollar being so inadequate that Washington can continue to flout long-established norms and commitments without consequence. The case for maintaining the dollar privilege is stronger than ever. The case for maintaining the dollar's privilege is stronger than ever, as ballooning deficit make it imperative to keep debt service costs low. Washington's strategy of using sanctions to further its national security interests, moreover, requires access to the financial tools that the dollar's positions afford. If the current administration carries on with his attack on the independence of the Federal Reserve and official statistical agencies, and continues to undermine the credibility of the United States international commitment, it could erode the dollar dominance on which so much of U.S. domestic and foreign policies depends. The dollar is not invulnerable. I repeat, the dollar is not invulnerable. And now it's not the time to make bad choices and count on good luck alone. If their currency falls from its pedestal, we're talking about the United States of America, Americans will pay the price. Thank you for the privilege of your time. That was the Salvant Report.